I buried my wife on a Tuesday morning in October, and my only son didn't bother to show up. While I stood over her casket in a Chicago cemetery, he was 3 states away on a beach in Florida, and when I finally got him on the phone, he told me the funeral wasn't worth his time. I said nothing back. I just hung up, walked behind the maintenance shed so nobody would hear me, and made a decision that would take me 8 years to actually carry out. If you've ever given everything to a child who gave you nothing in return, stay with me, because this one gets worse before it gets better. Before we start, hit subscribe so you don't miss how this ends, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever had to cut someone off completely. Let's get into it. My name is Walter Hensley. I'm 68 years old, and until recently, I thought I understood what family meant. My wife, Eleanor, fought cancer for 2 years. 2 years of appointments, treatments, bad days that turned into worse days, and one final week where she just wanted her son near her. Our son, Grant, lives in Manhattan. He works in finance, makes a good living, and for 8 years, I helped him make his mortgage payments without him ever once asking me to stop. I'll get to that part. But first, the funeral. Eleanor asked for Grant during her last week. Not once. Repeatedly. I called him. I texted him. I left voicemails that I'm not proud of, voicemails where my voice cracked because I was begging my own son to come say goodbye to his mother. He gave me excuses about work, about flights, about needing to sort things out first. Then Eleanor passed, and I had to plan a funeral without knowing if my son would even show up to it. I want to be clear that I'm not a man who enjoys conflict. I spent 34 years working the same job in logistics, raised my son the best way I knew how, and stayed married to the same woman for 41 years. I never imagined I'd end up standing at a funeral home wondering if my own child would bother to attend his mother's burial. But that's exactly where I found myself, arranging flowers and choosing a casket while checking my phone every few minutes like a man waiting on a doctor's diagnosis. The morning of the service, I stood at the front of that Chicago funeral home in a suit Eleanor picked out for me years ago, and I kept checking my phone. Nothing. I called Grant 6 times before the service started. On the 7th try, he finally picked up. I could hear wind and waves behind his voice, actual ocean sounds. I asked him where he was, and he told me he was in Miami with his wife, Kayla, taking a few days to relax before things got busy at work again. I asked him if he understood that his mother's funeral was happening in 4 hours. He said, and I remember this word for word, that the funeral wasn't worth his time, that funerals were for people who needed closure, and he'd already made his peace with his mother's death months ago. Then he hung up on me. I stood in the hallway of that funeral home holding my phone, and I felt something in my chest that I still can't fully describe. Not grief, exactly. Something colder. I put the phone in my pocket and walked back into the room to bury my wife alone. Midway through the service, my hands were shaking so badly that a family friend asked if I needed water. I said I was fine. I wasn't fine, but I got through the eulogy. After the service, while people were offering condolences I could barely process, my niece pulled me aside and showed me her phone. Grant's wife, Kayla, had posted a photo from a rooftop pool in Miami Beach. Cocktails, sunglasses, a caption about needing this getaway. Timestamp 2 hours before my wife's funeral started. I don't remember deciding to walk outside. I just remember finding myself behind the cemetery's maintenance shed, phone in hand, calling Grant again. He picked up this time, annoyed, asking why I kept calling. I asked him directly if he was in Miami enjoying a vacation while I buried his mother. He didn't deny it. He said he needed the break, that watching his mother get sick for 2 years had been exhausting for him too, and that everyone processes grief differently. I told him that processing grief and posting poolside pictures during her funeral were not the same thing. He got defensive, said I was being dramatic, and told me to stop calling him. I told him he was no longer my son. He laughed, said fine, and blocked my number before I could say another word. I want to back up here, because none of this happened out of nowhere. For years, Eleanor made excuses for Grant. When he missed Thanksgiving, she said he was busy building his career. When he missed Christmas 2 years running, she said New York was far and flights were expensive, even though he made more money than either of us ever had. When Eleanor got her diagnosis, she called Grant herself to tell him. He said all the right things on the phone, promised to visit soon. That visit turned into a single weekend 8 months later, where he spent most of his time on his laptop in the guest room, telling us he had a big deal closing and couldn't fully disconnect. As her illness progressed, his visits shrank instead of growing. 15-minute phone calls became 5-minute calls, then texts, then nothing. Eleanor asked for him constantly during her final months. She never said she was angry with him. She just kept saying she wished he'd come see her one more time. He never did. He wasn't there for her final days. And he wasn't there when she took her last breath in a hospital bed while I held her hand alone. Looking back, I can see the pattern so clearly now, though at the time I didn't want to. Every missed visit came with a reasonable-sounding explanation. Every broken promise came with an apology that sounded sincere in the moment. Eleanor and I would talk about it quietly at night, and she'd always land on the same conclusion. He'd come around eventually. He just needed time to grow into his responsibilities. I believed her mostly because I wanted to. Neither of us ever sat him down and told him plainly that his absence was hurting us. We just kept absorbing it year after year and calling it patience. A few days after the funeral, an old co-worker of mine named Dale stopped by the house with a casserole his wife had made, the way people do. Dale and I worked together for almost 20 years before I retired, and he'd known Eleanor almost as long as I had. We sat on the porch, and I told him everything. The phone call, Miami, the blocking. Dale listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said something that stuck with me. He told me that Eleanor spent decades protecting Grant from the consequences of his own choices, hoping that if she just loved him enough and covered for him enough, he'd eventually grow into the kind of man who showed up for people. Dale said sometimes love isn't covering for someone. Sometimes real love is stepping back and letting a person face what they've earned. He brought up his own brother, a man who gambled away 2 houses while their mother kept bailing him out financially every single time, convinced that one more rescue would be the one that finally taught him a lesson. It never was, because there was never a real consequence. Dale said his brother is 61 years old now and still doesn't understand why nobody trusts him with money. I sat with that for a long time after Dale left. That night, alone in the house for the first time since Eleanor passed, I couldn't sleep. I ended up at the kitchen table with my laptop, going through our joint bank account, mostly just to have something to do with my hands. That's when I found it. A recurring automatic transfer, $3,200 a month, going out to Grant's mortgage account in New York. I'd honestly forgotten the exact number, though I knew we sent him something. I did the math sitting right there at that table. 8 years. Over $300,000 total. It started when Grant first moved to Manhattan and needed help covering a gap in his mortgage while he settled into his new job. Eleanor and I agreed to help temporarily, just until he got on his feet. His salary grew every year after that. 6 figures within 3 years. The payment never stopped. Nobody ever asked us to stop it, and somewhere along the way, I think Eleanor and I both just let it become normal. The same way we let his absence become normal. I sat there looking at 8 years of transfers, and instead of feeling angry, I felt something closer to clarity. I thought about every birthday Grant missed, every holiday he skipped, every time Eleanor made an excuse for him at the dinner table while an empty chair sat across from me. I thought about how none of that ever stopped the money from leaving our account on the first of every month, like clockwork, like an obligation neither of us had the nerve to question. It struck me that we had been more consistent about paying his mortgage than he had ever been about showing up for his own mother. I clicked cancel on the automatic payment. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed. And for the first time since Eleanor died, I actually slept. About 3 weeks later, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. It was Grant. He'd unblocked me apparently, because his mortgage payment had bounced and he assumed it was a bank error. He asked me to call the bank and fix it. Just like that, casual, like nothing had happened between us. Like Miami never happened. Like the funeral never happened. I told him I hadn't made a mistake. I told him I canceled the payment myself on purpose, and I wasn't going to restart it. There was a long pause on the line. Then I said the words I'd been holding onto since the day he hung up on me at the funeral home. I told him his mortgage wasn't worth my time. Grant went quiet for a moment. Then his voice came back sharp. He said this was different, that money was real and practical, while a funeral was just an emotional event that wouldn't have changed anything. He genuinely seemed to believe that distinction made sense. That's when I stopped holding back. I told him exactly what he'd missed. I told him about the nights Eleanor cried herself to sleep asking why her only son wouldn't visit. I told him about the chemo sessions I sat through alone because he was too busy. I told him about her final week when she kept asking for him by name, and I had to keep telling her he'd be there soon. A promise I knew was a lie the moment I said it. Grant went silent for a long time. When he finally spoke again, his voice had changed. He admitted that he couldn't handle watching his mother get sick and decline, that it scared him, and that avoiding it felt easier than facing it. He said he let me carry all of it alone because he didn't know how to carry any of it himself. I told him I understood that fear is real. I also told him that fear doesn't erase what it cost his mother or what it cost me. I reminded him that I was scared too, every single day of those 2 years, and I showed up anyway, because that's what you do for someone you love. I told him this was the consequence, the one his mother never let him face for anything in his entire life, and I wasn't going to protect him from it the way she always had. Then I blocked his number again. 2 days later, someone called me from a number I didn't know. I picked up, thinking it might be a doctor's office or something related to Eleanor's remaining paperwork. It was Grant again, calling from a friend's phone this time, trying to reopen the conversation, trying to negotiate. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture him again. I just told him I'd said everything I needed to say 2 days earlier, and that repeating it wasn't going to change my answer. Then I blocked that second number too. I haven't heard from him since, and it's been peaceful in a way I didn't expect grief to ever include. In the weeks since, I've spent most of my time in Eleanor's garden, the one she planted years ago and never quite finished the way she wanted. I visit her grave regularly. I talk to her sometimes, which probably sounds strange, but it helps. I took the money that used to disappear every month into Grant's mortgage account and put it towards something Eleanor always wanted but never got to do. A cruise through the Mediterranean. stopping at the Greek islands she used to circle in travel magazines, and then quietly set aside, because there was always something more urgent to pay for. I booked it for next spring. I'm going alone, and I'm at peace with that. I don't feel guilty about any of this, and I think that surprises people when I tell them. Eleanor spent her whole life teaching other people, teaching coworkers, teaching neighbors, teaching me about accountability and follow through. The one place she could never apply that lesson was with her own son. I think, in the end, I finally applied it for her. Some nights I still sit in the garden after the sun goes down, and I ask myself if I did the right thing. Every time, I land in the same place. Loving someone doesn't mean shielding them from every hard truth about themselves forever. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop softening the landing and let a person feel the full weight of their own choices. Eleanor never got to see that lesson land where it mattered most. I like to think she'd understand why I finally let it. Life is moving forward for me, quietly and on my own terms. I imagine it's moving forward for Grant too, just with a consequence attached to it now, maybe for the first time in his life. If this story meant something to you, or if it reminded you of your own family, I'd really like to hear about it in the comments. And if you want more stories like this one, make sure you're subscribed, because there's more where this came from. Thank you for listening.